All right. All right. So today we're going to be talking about, I believe, vampires. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right. Okay, good.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, I think I'm here too.
The Red Cross goes my.
You get the Red Cross donation going on right here. Yeah, yeah. Right. I mean, if you're not, if we're not talking about, the vampires, I guess everything's in vain then, right? Sorry, well, it's bad, right? I have a thing for these puns, a big thing. So there you have it. Bad jokes all the way around. So it's quite a keeper. All right, so we're going to go on and go here. Obviously, I'm doing this talk after the passing of Anne Rice, who's known very much for interview with a vampire. That legacy will be long remembered. But let's go back into the origins of vampires. Now, the earliest origins revolves around the ancient traditions concerning the deceased, mysteries of those who have passed on, and the decomposition process, right? In the ancient world, if there happened to be an unusual death that could not be explained easily, people made the inferential leap that maybe something unworldly happened to them. Perhaps a god affected them, or perhaps a spirit or an ancestor. And yes, eventually we're going to get to the point of the vampire, right? Vampire. Now, in the case of death via disease, we got to remember in the ancient world, they believed that disease was connected to demons. So there's a high demonology in connection to what they didn't understand were pandemics, epidemics, right? And so sometimes it left markings on the body. They thought to themselves, ooh, markings on the body. Maybe, something touched them. Perhaps some kind of demon, some kind of monster. And so down the rabbit hole they went, right? Supernatural causes. Now today we immediately go to a scientific cause of things, right? We are living in the modern world or the postmodern world, even though the Lockean epistemology and Newtonian metaphysics has fallen apart and collapsed to almost a pragmatism and deconstructionism, we still live in a world that is modern or maybe even postmodern. So vampires, do they survive? Well, they do, actually, in modern culture, right? In many ways. So we're going to go investigate these myths. And we take a look. We do have to go back to the ancient world. And I do want to mention the fact that one of the biggest fears when it comes to how do I put this, things that happen to us is, of course, these unnatural causes. And immediately, many people believe that the cause of something that has happened to somebody, as I said, supernatural origins, could be indeed a person who has passed on, a person who has died and has come back, who has been reanimated. I've never seen so much evidence in the way during the Paleolithic and the Neolithic age of fear that those loved ones that you have left behind are going to come back to get you. That something else is going to be animated them, and something else is going to be bringing them, after you, right? So where are they getting this crazy idea, right? Well, what happens in many cases is, we have the process of decomposition, we have the process of decay, and sometimes it goes at a faster rate, sometimes it goes at a slower rate. But the reality is that we do all rot, or do we? Because what happened in the ancient world, as they found out, is that some people didn't rot right away. And the suspicion was they didn't rot. Maybe there's something that was keeping them preserved, keeping them alive. And of course, it could be just cold weather, and they're well preserved. Or that when they were buried, they were placed into a situation where it was airtight and they happened to be preserved. And, but the problem is that something else they noticed. The other thing they noticed is that, and this happened a little too often, is that a loved one who has passed away, days and months later, they kind of find them again. I'll talk about that a little bit. And they realize, hey, you know what? They're looking kind of still rather juicy. They're looking kind of bloated, and they have blood coming out of their mouths. Now, how is that possible? Well, of course, as you know, when we rot, right? So there's things that just kind of, our intestines kind of move around and blood comes out of our mouths. It's a pretty amazing process, but they don't understand that. So they're thinking to themselves, what this body did? It's preserved. It must have drank some blood, right? So this is the deduction. This is kind of what happens. Now let's go into the idea of resurrection. As for remedies that deal with these perceived vampires, the belief was that the physical body had to be rendered incapable of resurrecting, because what's going to happen, long and the short of it, is somebody dies, and then suddenly all these other people mysteriously die. We'll talk about what happens specifically in a little bit. And then what happens is they go, oh, maybe the person that just died, maybe they were involved in this. And so they exhume their bodies and they take a look at it. And they go, hey, this person's freshly preserved. He must have resurrected. So we got to do something about it. So what are we going to do? Well, in many cases, what they'll do is they'll cut off the head. You cut off the head, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to come back. In other cases, they'll cut off hands and feet. In other cases, they'll drive a stake right through the middle, all the way back into the ground, so it is incapable of getting up. When the invention of iron came about, iron was looked at as magical in many ways. When iron came about, they thought, hey, if these creatures touch iron, then maybe they're not going to come back that way. So let's talk about the belief of reanimation, the idea of appeasing spirits. You guys ready for it? So here we go. So now usually when I do this exercise, I have to do it in the way where I have like a class participate, but I can't do that over Zoom in this context. So just forgive me. I'll just have to give you all the explanation. It goes as follows. Okay, so the first earliest belief of reanimation of any kind of body coming back, and the fear thereof of that, it comes back to the Tosedo Hills in the African Kalahari Desert. Around 40,000 BCE, they discovered something. What they discovered was an image of a person throwing a spear at a bear. Okay. Then they saw right next to it, they found a headless bear body. It was just a headless bear body. And next to it, they found the bear head. And next to that, they found is like this clay with the mixture of bear fur in it. And we have identified that the fur came from the bear. And you're thinking to yourself, well, what is this? You go, wait, you got a bear body, you got a bear head, and you got a totem that has the fur of the bear mixed in to its clay. Well, this is, of course, a belief. You can see it, you can understand this. It could be, although there's always arguments about this, that the idea is, remember the man throwing the spear, the image of that? But this bear, well, it attacked them, or it could have been just a good game, or maybe they want to have some kind of guarantee of good luck. Whatever the case, There's a story there that's being depicted there, and they got the bear and they cut its head off. The bear is not going to come back, right? The bear is not going to come back because its head is cut off. But the perspective is that the fur from this bear has been transferred over to this image. It's kind of like deferment, right? Okay, bad joke. So what happens is the animation process is you're having the spirit of this bear is being transferred from the bear body into the image. Do you guys see that? And that way, you're not going to have to worry about that. That bear is not coming back to haunt perhaps the village or the area. We have more of this. We talked about also, I mentioned the Paleolithic age, cutting off hands and legs and so forth. We have another example, and I'll mention this real briefly, and that is the idea of the Natufians. The Natufians are thriving, 9,000 BCE, 8,000 BCE, all throughout the ancient Middle East, Jericho, and so forth. And what happens with them is that for them, in their case, long and the short of it is that when a person, well, I'll explain what will look like. So basically, you have the various huts, and they're circular. And they found in the middle of these huts, they found a small raised platform that has red ochre paint on it. And on that raised platform, there happens to be a skull that's missing its jaw. And the skull is painted over, it's plastered over, and has seashells for eyes. And it's looking directly out through the front door. So that basically happens is that when you're coming home and you're Natufian, you're, hi, Mom, I'm home. And the first thing you see, that friendly face, is a skull that is sitting there on a little low platform. And you're supposed to be happy about that. This is a good thing. But why is that? We'll talk about that in a few seconds. And then what happens is that if you excavate these houses, you realize that all underneath are these headless bodies. And around the perimeter, you have skulls all the way around. So once again, you have this idea of the spirit being released when you cut off its head. Are you following me, right? It's being released. But the other thing is, it's also believed to continue on, these ancestors are to continue on to protect the house. See how that works? So basically, when grandma dies, what you do is you take grandma's body, put it up there, let the birds peck away at the flesh. We know that for a fact because we see bird peck marks all over these bones. Clean off the flesh. And you take grandma's head, you put it on the podium there. She's the most recent dead. And then, of course, grandma's body, the rest is buried under the house. And then when grandpa dies, what you do is kind of like your rotating tires, is you take grandma's head and you put it in the perimeter of the hut, and grandpa's head is placed there on the little red podium. You guys getting this? And that will be the next one looking after the spirit. So you have already this conversation of mixing with spirits. And it's a methodology. It's all over the place, not just in the Tuvians. We have that at Kaptel Fuya, the famous place. Bodies are being buried under the house, but the skulls are elsewhere, right? So we have a constant culture. Okay, well, and I said before, beyond just the cutting off of the head, by the cutting off the head, even continued in Egypt all the way up for a long time, but before the pre-dynastic period begins. They still continued that process. But as time goes on, they're going, maybe we'll just cut off the feet. And so we have during the Neolithic age, people are cutting off the feet. Why? They don't want you to go anywhere. There is a fear that people will come back, right? Now, moving on, right? Well, this brings us to Lilith. Lilith is a very important part when it comes to vampire mythology. It really is. And because I'll just give you a preview so you don't go, well, we're talking about Lilith forever. Okay, so the Lilith idea goes into the Lilith 2 idea, which goes into the succubus, right? The succubus idea. And that idea kind of filters out into Greco-Roman mythology. And that idea, in turn, goes into Eastern Europe. And that idea mixes together with local lore, and that helps us create the vampire. You guys got it? So that's the building blocks. We have to start again with Lilith. Does that make sense? Right? You guys got that? So how are we talking about this? Now you know why. Okay, so Lilith. Lilith, first of all, comes from Mesopotamia, right? She is connected to the Lamashtu. These are basically, this is a demon that has a head of a lioness. He has donkey teeth and ears, and very hairy body, long fingers, and bird feet with long talons. And these talons are used to attack. They're used to penetrate. They're used to, get their prey. In many cases, the talons are the precursor of the fangs, right? So you got the talons going in there, attacking, right? They often, in this case, in this context, in ancient Mesopotamia, they're poised to attack the unborn or the newly born or nursing infants, making her an especial threat to new mothers, typically gnawing on their bones, and yes, of course, sucking on their blood. If she is able to touch a woman's pregnant body 7 times, so if she's able to touch the woman's belly 7 times, what happens is that she will miscarriage. So this is, of course, these connections. In many cases, what women will do is, how do we protect ourselves from the Lamashtu? How do we do this? Well, she's a demon. She's pretty powerful. So we need to get a stronger demon to fight that demon. And so in many cases, they will have an amulet of Pazuzu. Pazuzu, do you guys remember The Exorcist? Mm-hmm. That is Pazuzu. And Pazuzu, yes, it's a demon, but it's a demon that doesn't like the Lamashtu. And so one demon trumps the other demon, so to speak. Got it? But she also enjoys slaying men and drinking their blood too. So you have this vampiric aspect of her. And she also brings destruction, men, beasts, trees, rivers, roads, everything. She's flesh-eating. She's blood-sucking. This is the Lamashtu. And then, of course, another form of Mesopotamian vampiric kind of creature is known as a Galu, closely connected with the Lamashtu and the Lilith aspect. It has we have some incantations. It tells us how these spirits threaten every house, rage at people, eat their flesh, and as they let their blood flow like rain, I'm reading an inscription here, they never stop drinking blood. So these are blood-suckers, blood-sucking demons that, these are vampires, right? But in a spiritual, supernatural sense. You have also those known as the Lilith, referred to in Sumerian and Babylonian and Assyrian tablets, who are often viewed as also sucking blood, right? And they are water and air elementals, right? Now, let's get to Lilith, because Lilith is very important when it comes to vampiric lore. The story goes is that Inanna, she plants a willow tree in the garden at Uruk. It's known as the Hulupu tree. It's the Hulupu tree. And she later intended to make a new throne from the wood of the Hulupu tree. But when she gets there 10 years later, Inanna, the goddess, is ready to cut down this tree when she discovers a serpent at the very base of the tree. Inanna calls upon Gilgamesh, who is, of course, Gilgamesh, to slay the serpent. In reaction to slaying the serpent, the Zawbird on top of the tree goes away, flies off, leaving what's called the Ki Siko Lulaki, which had made its home in the trunk of the tree. In response to this impending threat, this Lilith destroys its own home and that sets off into the forest. And of course, some people will translate this as an owl. Other people will be a water spirit. But according to the Mesopotamians, this is Lilith. Lilith, or Lilith's association with Inanna, is found throughout Sumerian records. She was the beautiful maiden She was also the perpetual maiden, for her breasts were always barren of milk, and her womb was always empty. She could never bear children. Like Inanna, Lilith was connected to ritual prostitution, intending to inspire sexual activity with men so that the resulting union would bring about fertility magic through directing this energy towards both fields and animals. So this is how she was used. One Sumerian text states, Inanna has sent the beautiful, unmarried, and seductive prostitute Lilith out into the fields and streets in order to lead men astray. Lilith only inspired sexual activity amongst the unmarried, those who are often strangers to one another, and never to married couples. She was not about human reproduction either as a result of these unions, but about the energy and how this energy was manifested into the natural world. Okay, this is a very strange god demon-like spirit, is it not? Right? This is Lilith or Lilith too. She is known as the daughter of heaven, and she has free will. So what happens is that there's paranoia, just like the others, to protect the babies, but also men from the Lilith or the Lilith. Okay, so what's going to happen is that as time goes on, the Lilith idea spreads into Judaism. Here we go, through something that is known as the Shedem cult. These, of course, the Shedem cult within Judaism, they believe in elemental demons associated with water, often storm gods. And so Jewish stories involve them. Sometimes they're in the form of serpents, right? And of course, there's a story that you have these spirits were created on the seventh day of creation. And of course, you have the story of Adam and Lilith, which we don't talk about today. That'll be another topic altogether. But what happens now is that we find the Lilith in the Hebrew Bible itself. The general word Lilith or Lilith appears in Isaiah 34:14 and may be translated as night creatures, night monster, night hag, and screech owl. Well, now it enters into Judaism, but very much into popular Judaism. And then it goes right into the Talmud. Okay? It connects to a certain Mesopotamian rituals. For example, it says that she has wings. It goes on here. Ra Judah, I'm reading now the Talmud. Ra Judah, citing Samuel, ruled, if an abortion had the likeness of a Lilith, its mother is unclean by reason of the birth, for it is a child, but it has wings. Lilith is also described as having very long hair. And so she grows her long hair like Lilith, sits when making water like a beast, and serves as a bolster for her husband. In connection with lust, Lilith was already known to seduce and have sex with men in the Talmud. Rabbi Hananiah said, one may not sleep in a house alone, and whoever sleeps in a house alone is seized by Lilith. So this, of course, is a reference to nocturnal emissions. Now we're suddenly moving in from Judaism. Are you seeing this? Into the succubi conception, right? Are you seeing these connections, right? And lust, the vampires, are they connected to lust today? Are you kidding me? Right. You're following, right? You're understanding where these ideas are coming from. Well, with the cornucopia stories related to Lilith within Jewish tradition, Lilith then becomes associated as a succubus, especially mentioned in the Zohar and the alphabet of Ben Sira. So now, all of a sudden, you have the succubus idea. Now, the succubus idea is not only within Judaism. It is a connection to Judaism is just one aspect of it, but it's moving through Mesopotamian thought. The succubi conception is moving through Mesopotamian thought, and that kind of idea is going to run in to the Indo-European ideas around the Mediterranean. which is, of course, the Greeks and the Romans, and they will merge because they have their own forms of vampiric creatures. Okay, so in general, a demonic succubus will most often take the form of a very beautiful woman and will approach a man while he is sleeping and then steal his seed with their designs of intimacy. So already you're getting this idea that these creatures, they move at night. They arrive when a person is sleeping. They are, in a sense, very quiet. They're very secretive. This will go into vampiric lore, as you can imagine, right? Okay, now what happens is that, in fact, in a few cases, men are awakened, they become enchanted, and then they either voluntarily submit or are coerced to do so, including other sexual acts beyond the simple act itself. And in many cases, there will be this relationship between the succubus and the male, and it will go over a period of time. But what she's going to be doing is that man is going to get weaker, and he's going to get weaker because she is draining his life vitality from him. Much in the way, of course, we'll later have the drinking of the blood, right? Draining the vitality from him. Okay, so you have this idea of men approach while sleeping, seduction, stealing seed, taking something from the man, right? And later on, you're going to see the vampires taking something from the man and the woman, right? There's also a connection to the moon. In many cases, the new moon, where what will happen is that during the time of the new moon, supposedly, the person will become even more drained and could die. And so now we're having this new idea again, right? Where you're going to have a succubus will feed on its host over a period of time, draining them, and eventually that person will die, just as we see with the vampires, right? They don't usually take everything at once, at least a more classic vampire. They take a little at a time, a little dose here, a little there. The person gets weaker, like Bram Stoker's vampire, right? It's a period of time, not right away, because you want to keep it going as long as you can to keep the energy going. But the exchange here, as opposed to blood, is semen. But eventually, of course, blood will do. And you can see where that's connected. Now, Lilith and the succubi and the Lilith are kind of creepy at times. By the way, I want to clarify this. Sometimes they'll say it's Lilith, especially in Jewish tradition, or they'll say Lilith too, because sometimes Lilith becomes not a singular but a plural, and so it's understood as multiple demons. And sometimes it's understood Lilith or the Lilith too are succubi, and in some cases it's just succubi. You guys got it? Because popular culture is never cut and dry like that. There's always a mixture of terms and ideas. But a Lilith or the Lilith too are known also to toy with children. While they'll kill babies, they're toying with children, and they will make them laugh. And so, especially in Jewish tradition. And so what happens is it is instructed that if you hear your child laughing in bed, Lilith was there, or the Lilith too, and you're supposed to go up to your child and point them in the nose. By doing so, apparently, the Lilith will flee, and your child will not succumb to these suggestions, right? Now, these ideas from the Middle East, or I should say the Near East, and from Jewish tradition, it's floating over, and it's merging with indigenous ideas, especially, of course, Greek ideas, Greek and Roman. And, of course, we have, as a result, the mixture with those known as the Impusa, the Lamia, and the Stregas, these ideas. So here we go. The Lamia, let's talk about the Lamia. Lamia was the daughter of King Belus and a secret lover with Zeus. This is never a good idea. You never want to be a secret lover anything with Zeus, because Zeus has a way of getting back. Well, not he getting back, but his wife has a way of getting back, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Although sometimes he gets back too. Once upon a time, Lamia was a beautiful mistress of Zeus, but jealous Hera slayed all of her children. Slayed all of her children except for Scylla, and turned Scylla into a hideous demon who hunts and eats children. According to another story, Hera steals all of Lamia's children, making her lose her mind so that she, in addition to Scylla, that she begins to kill and eat the other children out of her sense of loss and envy. In fact, Lamia swore vengeance and often preyed on young children and would find them sleeping in bed. And we have the addition, she is also known to suck their blood. So she becomes vampiric. So after a while, she turns into a demon due to this lowly, excessive and obsessive behavior. She will be cursed by Hera to never close her eyes, because she wants to forget the fact that all her children were killed, and Hera makes her eyes unclosing so that she can always see them or see what happens. But Zeus had mercy because he enabled her to take out her eyes. And that way she didn't have to see it. So you just kind of, I don't know where she put the eyes, maybe in her purse. I don't know. Digging for coins. Where's that? Oh, it's my eye. I apologize for that. Yes, right out of the sockets. Another creature is called Impusa. She was the daughter of the goddess Hecate, and she is demonic. She has bronze coloring, right? And she feasted on blood. And what's interesting about her is that she transforms into a female, a beautiful female, and she lures men, and then she sucks their blood, and she lives off of that. So we're having a lot now of the vampiric lore taking place. You see how it's coming together, except there's one problem. They're not humans yet. So we're still missing that vital step. And we'll get there in a few moments. The Greek vampires are encountered in the Odyssey as well. And then these ideas then spreads into the eastern section of the Roman Empire and mixes with Greek thought. It mixes with Latin thought, and all comes together around the Danube. Oh, here we go. And as a result, Slavic ideas for vampires start to arise. One of the connections is that there is a Roman version of Lamia known as Strix. If you want to transliterate it as S-T-R-I-X, you can. Strix was known to feast on children and preyed on young men. It was described as having a bird-like body. And in fact, it's a nocturnal bird that feeds on flesh and blood. And this is mentioned first in the 2nd or 3rd century CE. Well, this idea, the Roman Strix, has aspects of Lamia, and it also has aspects of the Lilith and the Near Eastern form of vampires. What happens is that it mixes now with vampires around the realm of Romania. Now we got to remember that the Roman Empire, under the Emperor Trajan, conquered what will become Romania. That's ancient Dacia. And many of you may know this, and many of you may not know, is that Romania is a Latin language. It has Latin roots, just like Italian or Spanish or Portuguese or French or Romanish in Switzerland, whoever thinks about them. You have also Romanian is a Latin-based language. And so that mythology spreads into ancient Dacia, right? And because of that, Strix, the Roman Strix, becomes the Romanian vampire known as the Strigoi. There it is. There's a connection, Strigoi. So the connection is direct. So Strix, Strigoi. You guys got it? So all these ideas go in there. Also, it goes into the Albania, Shitrika, and into the general, the Slavic Strigoi. Interesting, right? So now these ideas are coming together. So let's look in to Albania now, right? So the areas of Albania, you're going to have folklore, and it's spelled Shtriga. So it is Shitriga. It sounds like something else. I'm sorry. There's no other way to say it, right? Shitriga. If you have a little roll, it sounds a little cleaner, right? Is often understood to be a witch who goes about sucking the blood of sleeping infants at night, and then afterwards she turns into a fly or a moth or a bee. She is very Lilith-like in aspect. Those, of course, who were drained, they got sick. And so what happened is that others, of course, they don't want them too sick. So what will happen is the witches will drain, but they'll also keep you alive. And how you do that? Well, they will actually spit in your mouth, and that'll keep you alive a little bit longer. So her energy. So yeah, that kind of works, right? She often has a very disfigured face, with a crooked nose, gray eyes, hateful expression, and she oftentimes is known to wear a cape to cover herself. Hey, this is interesting, right? The cape. I wonder where the cape came from. There you have it. And what happens is that she tries to give people the evil eye, right? To curse them, because she wants to drain them. She wants to kill them. There you have it. What about the Romanian Strigoi? The Romanian Strigoi, Strigot, can actually derive, even in Latin, from the word scream. So these are screamers, right? And these are, again, living witches. Let's go a little further. Living witches who possess two hearts, and they possess two souls. So, and they were said to meet at night in nocturnal meetings. But you ready for the next step? It happens in Romania. What happened in Romania? Do you guys notice the vampiric roles in Romania is always so important? And you see why historically it is. So if you ever want to go to Romania, I guess I'm talking, I haven't made the connection yet. So the connection is okay, is that when you're a Strigoi, right, when you die, you become a reanimated corpse. There, we did it. We made that bridge. We just crossed over, right? Because before, the vampire-like creatures were demons. They're, goddesses. They were all supernatural. Well, it's all supernatural. But, where's the human? They're always feeding on the humans, right? Well, now in Romania, well, actually it's ancient Dacia at that time, wasn't called Romania. Although the idea of Romania is Roma, right? Rome, which is Rome. It can survive. That's why it's called Rome, Romania, right? So what happens is in that area, you're going to have the vampire connecting to now the undead. The connection is made. And of course, they will become revenants. Okay, so we understand that. Now, how can you tell that you are one of these Strigoi? That is a witch. That is when you die, you're going to become a vampire-like creature. Well, a few things. First of all, if you have an extra nipple, you have extra nipple. I'm sorry, it's too late. If you have a tail, how many here have a tail? 1, 2, So if you have a tail, yeah, you're one of these. If you have a membrane in front of your face, anybody have membranes? No. Okay. No, we I guess we all have membranes, don't we? Okay, in front of our face with the masks. Okay. All right. So we're going to end this real quick. All right. Sorry. They also finally they have lots of extra hair. I'm safe. I won't mention the third nipple. Okay, moving right along. So that you could be they could be a vampire. Also, if you are the seventh child in any family where all the previous siblings were the same sex. So if they're all males or all females and you come along, you're the seventh in a row, I'm sorry, you're not only born a witch or stickboy, you're going to go and continue on to become a revenant. There's other ways too. I'm sorry. They actually, some people believe black cats crossing your path. If you're pregnant, will make the baby inside turn into a strict boy, right? So be careful with that. Also, of course, if you died an unnatural death before baptism, that was very important. Now, finding a vampire is not always easy. So how do you find a vampire in this region? Well, according to legend, you need a 7-year-old boy and a white horse. That seems pretty easy, just grab a 7-year-old boy, maybe place it on a horse right there. And the boy should be dressed in white. And they're supposed to go around a graveyard at midday. And you watch, because what happens is that when the horse, the boy, stops at a certain grave, that's the grave of a revenant. That's the grave of a vampire. And you start to dig, chances are it's all preserved and, kind of bloated and, blood coming out of its mouth. And you have to do a certain ritual. So that's pretty easy. You just, if you worry about, go over to the local cemetery. If they see you with a horse and a 7-year-old boy walking around, you say, hey, you tell the officer, hey, I'm just looking for vampires. And I'm sure they'll let you go. Just doing my job, keeping things going. All right. So there you have it. Right. Vampires and humans can mix. It's not a very good idea, but they can. And as a result of that, they're known. They are. But we'll go into that later. I will describe that a little bit later. Let's go into, maybe we'll want to describe it now. I'm getting impatient with myself. Yeah, okay, I'll go skip over this one. So what happens is that revenants, what happens is that they look the way I described. And the other thing is that they're known to have black hair, bigger noses, bigger ears, bigger teeth, and bigger lips. So their facial features are really exaggerated. And if you're a mixture between a vampire and a human, and you're born, and you're allowed to live, then also what's going to happen is that you're actually more powerful than a vampire. And so you're able to kill more people too. So that is to be because you have a living vitality in you. Plus, you have that supernatural aspect. So there's no movies about this. This would be an interesting movie. Oh. Wouldn't it? Right?
There's Blade.
Well, yeah, Blade. I guess you do have Blade.
Just the Daywalker.
Yeah. The Daywalker, yeah, because that's the other thing. They can walk during the day, so they can eat, they can act like us, but they're not us. So, and of course, a lot of that they say comes from paranoia of the other, or in many cases, the monstrous other. And so what's going to happen. You're following this. So what will happen is that these vampires they're all over the place. Got to watch out for them. Oh, because they mate with women. I'm pregnant. They'll say, "Oh, did you cheat on me?" No. Oh, no. A vampire impregnated me. Oh, it's a vampire's baby. Yeah. And unfortunately, I know I talked about, there's abortion is a no-no, right? But if it's a baby that's from a vampire, it's a different question. So this is, you can see how they use this as a way to get out of situations. Are you seeing that? It's like, well, we got, because you don't want to be born because it's going to have this big teeth and nose and ears and it's going to be a monster and kill people. I mean, nobody wants that, it's like, hey, so what they will do is they'll dispose of the baby. Does that make sense? So you can see how this goes as vampires are used as a social excuse. There's been lots of interesting papers on that. But I just want to mention, humans, we haven't changed that much. All right. So where do we go from here? All right. So where do we go from here? Let's see here. Okay. I covered that too. And I covered that. Wow. All right. All right. I think I'm skipping something here. So give me a few seconds here. The station identification. Oh, all right. All right. Okay. Oh, okay. So William. William of Newburgh. Let's talk about William. William wrote as follows in 1190 about revenants. He says, it would not be easy to believe that the corpses of the dead should sally, I know not by what agency, from their graves, and should wander about to terror or destruction of the living, and again return to the tomb, which of its own accord opened to receive them. Did not frequent examples occurring in our own time suffice to establish this fact, to the truth of which there is abundant testimony? According to one story mentioned by William of Newsburg, an outlaw of evil conduct, he fled York, he got married, and became suspicious of his wife. And so what he did is he actually placed himself in the rafters of the house because he wanted to see what his wife is doing. And, she was doing somebody. He was not very happy about that. And he was like, oh, and he falls to his death. Okay. Well, what happens? He's given a Christian burial, right? Even though it really is beneath him, right? And of course, what happens by the handiwork of Satan, according to William, from his grave at nighttime and pursued by a pack of dogs with horrible barkings, he wandered through the court and around the houses while all men made fast their doors and did not dare to go abroad on any errand whatever, beginning of the night until sunrise, for fear of meeting and being beaten black and blue by a vagrant monster. So now they become a real threat. Revenants are known to kill now many people, right? So they're murdering people. I'll talk about how they murder them in a little bit, but there you have it. Now, what they also notice here is William talks about the fact that they did dig up this guy's grave. They removed a whole bunch of earth and laid bare the corpse, swollen to an enormous corpulence, with its countenance beyond measure turgid and suffused with blood, while the napkin in which it had been wrapped appeared nearly torn to pieces. And so what do? They cut the body up in pieces and they burn it, which is the tradition. In the 12th century, the same period of time, there was another vampire-like creature was mentioned in the Inquisition records of Hungary, associated with the city of Saropatak, where the inquisitors questioned a local pagan shaman who was placed on trial. The shaman claimed that that he invoked a demon by the name of Zykus, which means bloodsucker, who killed anybody that was persecuting fellow pagans like himself. So there you go. And so he admitted this to the Inquisition. And so there you have it. Okay, and then of course, what will happen is King James mixes the idea of incubi and succubi with that of the dead as well in his demonology in 1597. All right, so you're thinking, okay, Dr. Eichelt, that was great. So I guess we have all the concepts. No, we don't. There's more. There's another idea that layers over. I'm not going to spend too much time on this guy, but I do want to bring him up. You guys ever heard of Vlad the Impaler?
Yes.
All right, so we got to bring up old Vlad because we just got to do it. Right? Vlad lived from 1428 to 1477. He was not a nice guy. He was not a nice guy. He was in Romanian. His name, of course, was Vlad Dracula. Vlad Dracula. What does Dracula mean? This connects to it actually means the son of the dragon, because his father was the first Dracula. Got it? And he was also, as his father was too, part of an order of the dragon. The Order of the Dragon was founded in 1408 to fight the Ottomans, the Muslim Ottomans. This is what the order is all about. Unfortunately, the word Dracula, the meaning changes from the idea of dragon. Of course, they did look at Satan as the great dragon. The idea changes. And so what happens is that the idea is that Dracula, he is the son of the devil. There you got it, right? So it's no longer the son of the dragon. He's the son of the devil. So he must do some pretty terrible things. Well, he does. I mean, he is the ruler of Wallachia, right? And again, the southern Carpathians along the Danube and close to, guess where? The Romanian area. We're back to this again. Romanian area, Danube. Yeah, there you have it. Vlad, he actually lived with the Ottomans for a while because he was hostage of them. And then he fought with the Ottomans to win back his home against his brothers. He takes over, and then he secures his land. Of course, the Ottomans say, "Hey, I guess you're going to be our vassal now." And he says, "I don't think so." And of course, he impales most of the envoys on the stake. So that is not going to happen. So he's stuck with it. Okay, so sorry. You're all looking impaled. All right. So what happens is that he fights against the Saxons, the Transylvanian Saxons. He doesn't like them. Well, he really doesn't like them. And here's where things get muddy, because the Transylvanian Saxons don't like him back. And so, of course, did he really do the things that he claimed he did? A lot of people say yes. A lot of people say no. So it's a controversy. But at that time, it looks like yes. So he liked to impale people. This is awful. He impaled or murdered 300 boys at once. One time, he impaled entire populations of villages. Some priests, a couple priests said, "Hey, we want to go to heaven. That's our." He said, "Oh, I'll help you." And he impaled the priest. Just not a nice guy, right? One legend has that he had a copper cauldron, and he put everybody in it, and then he boiled them alive. So there he is. Yeah. So by the way, Bram Stoker will use this connection with Vlad the Impaler. I just want to mention that. So he's is he a vampire? Well, not from historical records, but you can see how the folklore is going to take over. But in many ways, the Vlad the Impaler idea is cemented into the vampiric lore as late as the latter part of the 19th century. So it's a Johnny-come-lately. Did it happen way back in the 1400s? Yes, it did. But it's still a newer, it's newer to the vampiric realm. But it is where we get the word Dracula, right? And that's kind of cool, sort of. They said today, looking at the evidence, he's mass murder and everything else, that he would be he's guilty of genocide because he killed so many people, and that he was guilty of war crimes. And today, that he'd be in big trouble. At least some people. Unfortunately, in Romania, he's become kind of a hero. So he's like he just was a really strong order. I mean, after all, Ceausescu thought he was a great guy. Ceausescu, wait a minute, that's a monster. I know. Ceausescu was a monster. So he's like, he's a great guy. So follow him as he murders and does, kills his own people at the same time. So just kind of throwing that one out. You got to kind of worry about the recommendation where it comes from. It's like Ceausescu gives him 5 thumbs up. Okay, moving right along. Maybe we're not. I forgot to bring it. There is an early 20th century work, and I have it at home, original volume, and it's by Lawson. And it is an anthropologist that studied the Greek vampires. And it's written, yeah, it's pretty cool, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll give you some information about that, where according to them, starting from the, he records vampires from the 1600s all the way to his time during the 20th century, where for his perspective, vampires are alive and well. He doesn't believe so, but the people he's interviewing do. So we're going to talk about that right now. Okay, so Lawson talks about, goes back to the 1600s. And of course, he talks about the fact that I myself have I found information and from older narratives going back to the 17th century. He said the island of Santorini, which is ancient Thera, acquired so enduring a notoriety in this respect of referring to vampires that even at the present day, to send vampires to Santorini is a proverbial expression. They're just, when in doubt, you're having vampire problems. What do? You send the vampire to Santorini, of course. Now, there's an interesting habit that the Greek Orthodox have, and I have to bring this up because things will make a lot more sense. Because you have vampire fever going on in a big way, and that is that even up into the 21st century, when you die, there is not a lot of land in Greece. So you are buried for 3 to 5 years and you rent your cemetery space. Now you're thinking this is a new idea. No, this actually goes back 1,500 years. This is a tradition that goes all the way back. And so that means is that 3 to 5 years in, you are going to be digging up your loved one. And it's expected that your loved ones will be there to put the body into ossuary, right? They clean out the bones and you wash it with wine. Now, if there's nobody to show up for the exhuming of the body, they will do so. Put this in a common burial area, and they'll actually get rid of the body through chemicals. This is in 2021. I mean, this is I've dated myself. 2022 and then going on. Sorry, I don't want to date the video. You got the point. This idea continues on. So that means is that they're all for a long time they're checking on bodies. So the fact that the bodies are preserved after 3 years, they start to think vampires, right? Because their ritual is to dig up the bodies in the first place to look at them. So that means there's a lot more evidence of vampires than other places where you're not going to be constantly checking in on the body later on. You guys got that? Right? Okay, so here we go. Okay, so the most common form of Greek, the common form of the Greek name for the species of vampire is a brukolakis, which goes into the Slavic word virokolas, and this idea goes further. Such bodies do. I'm reading right now from the source. He said that these bodies are oftentimes the people who did evil. They were excommunicated. Such bodies do not have those of other dead men and suffer decomposition after burial. No turn to death, but having, as it appears, a skin of extreme toughness, becoming swollen and distended all over, so that the joints can scarcely be bent. The skin becomes stretched like a parchment of a drum. When struck, it actually gives the same sound. What? You mean these people are drumming people? Yes. To the point where this happens so often, they actually call these corpses tympanius, or drum-like. And what they'll do, and there's descriptions of this, where the body is so bloated, they will actually roll the body. And it will make a sound. You never thought about this before, right? It's pretty morbid, right? And you can the skin's so tight, you can tap on it and it makes a drum noise, just like a tympanion, just like a stretched skin. And when you think about the old drums, right? Stretched hides, right? So it's the same idea, except it's a whole body that's distended out with joints that don't move. Okay, that was a pretty picture. So yeah, we're talking about a culture of understanding the world this way. Now, so how do they kill you? Okay, this is creepy. You ready for something worse? Okay. So what they do is they come out of the tomb. They do kill you right out sometimes too. But there's another way. In the middle of the night, they go up to your household and they call the person's name. Whoever they want to kill, they call the person's name. If you answer, you will be dead the next day. If you answer. So, somebody, calls out, I gotta make up a name. I don't want to upset anybody. I'll say, there's old Tommy is listening. Tommy. And you go, yes. It's over. You will be found dead in your bed the next day. However, here's a trick. And sometimes they call it, sometimes, they whisper it, which is worse, right? But they only call your name once. So the trick is that if you hear your name, you wait. And if they call your name again, then you can answer. Then you're okay. So it's the first name thing. So they never call the same name twice. They'll just call different people. You guys got it? So it's kind of a strange idea, right? But there you have it. Now, what will happen is that when they find these bodies, there's a suspicion of the fact that there is a vampire in the area, and they know who it is. They can identify them. Then what they'll do is they'll go to the body, they'll go to the grave, and they will take the body out of the grave. They'll do prayers, and they'll burn them on a pyre. Sometimes. Actually, I have right here an ordinance from the Greek Orthodox Church on vampires. Isn't that great? I have it right here. Yeah. And of course, it's really long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But it does say, but know that when such remains to be found, the which, as we have said, is the work of the devil, ye must summon the priest to chant an invocation of the Mother of God and to perform memorial services for the dead with funeral meats. So we do have some suggestions. It's believed to come from, of course, the devil itself. I have a whole bunch of fun stories. These are awful stories. They're not fun at all. And there are stories like this. These are all primary sources. A tomb having for some reason been opened at the Church of St. Anthony. On top of the bones of other men, there was found lying a corpse perfectly whole. It was unusually tall of stature. Interesting. Clothes, it had none. Time or moisture having caused them to perish. The skin was distended, hard and livid, and so swollen everywhere that the body had no flat surface, but was round like a full sack. The face was covered with hair, dark, curly, but on top of the head, there's very little hair. Okay, and it appeared smooth all over. The arms and regions of swelling of the corpse were stretched out on each side, yada, yada, eyelids closed, mouth gaping, teeth white, yada, yada. So you have these, descriptions of these vampires, right? Devils. You have also Santorini. There's other stories where they come around and they're animated and they kill people. There's too many stories like that. Destruction of property and death and diabolical possessions, right? In fact, in many cases, you have to perform even an exorcism to get them out, which is fascinating, right? Then they come up with another idea. They've realized that sometimes, if they stake the body, and they try to burn it, sometimes that vampire will not burn. They tried. They put it out there in the fire. It wouldn't burn or spit out. What are we going to do? And they try to cut its head off, and they can't do that. So how can you get rid of it? Are you guys taking notes? Hopefully not too many. So what you want to do is that you have to take out its heart. If you take out its heart, then oftentimes the vampire will suddenly get old and age like crazy and turn into dust. There's the beginning of those stories. You've seen this before, right? The vampire, right? These various movies, and even beforehand, So you stab it through the heart. In this case, you take it out, and all of a sudden the vampire goes like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You wonder where that comes from? This is where it starts. Does that make sense? So in Greek understandings of vampires, that's what. Now, are all vampires? Are they all mean? Well, they're not all mean. You want me to tell you a nice vampire story from? Okay, it's from Santorini because it's where all the vampires go. Apparently, after a while they become civilized. So there's one in Santorini, a shoemaker named Alexander. He lived at Pyrgos. He became a vampire, and he used to frequent his house, and he'd spend his time mending his children's shoes. What a nice vampire. He would draw water at the reservoir to make sure that his family got water, and he cut wood for the use of his family. So this is a nice vampire. He's like duty driven, all the other vampires are killing all these people and, or whispering their name. And he's out there mending shoes and giving them water. But people got too creeped out and frightened. And as a result, unfortunately, they killed him. Well, not unfortunately, but, he's a nice vampire. So, there's always an exception. He failed vampire school, apparently. But again, you have this idea of possession that spreads out. I want to bring up that there's going to be vampires will be blamed for everything, but there will be epidemics of vampirism, not only in Greece, but a whole bunch of them in other places throughout the Slavic realms. And it's very strange. I mean, let's think about this. Okay, so you're going to have a vampire dies, and then suddenly, all these other people start to die. Yeah, and and certain people start to go crazy, and then they start to die. You guys making connections yet? Pandemics, diseases. They don't understand germs, right? So they're thinking that vampires are wiping out all these people. And really, it's called, a disease moving through and killing all these people. Does that make sense? But this is their way of explaining it. Let's blame the poor vampire, right? Sorry. Okay. So there you have it. Also, by the way, if you do take out a vampire's heart, you got to make sure that you cut it into shreds and you put it in vinegar. So just a heads up on that if you're interested. Yeah, it's good to know, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Now, I want to mention a few other things here. I want to mention the fact that we're out of time too. Devastating whole places. He mentions. Okay, so in short, Lawson. The classes of persons who are most liable to become a vampire as follows. Okay, you guys ready? So this is your checklist. Okay, so make sure, and then we're going to go on to another topic. Those who have not received the full and due rites of burial. I don't think any of you guys fit this one. Those who meet a sudden death. Those children conceived or born on one of the great church festivals are considered. So you're born on a church festival. That can make you a vampire. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Those who die under a curse. Those who have an extra belly button. Yeah. Okay. Those who are excommunicated. Any excommunicated here? No? Those who are unbaptized. Anybody unbaptized? Okay, there you go. So you're a vampire now. Okay? Those who are into magic or sorcery. Anybody there? Okay. And those who have eaten the flesh of a sheep which was killed by a wolf. Anybody here have? No? Is that kind of odd? Does that happen every day? We'll get back to me on that one, right? Right. Those over whose dead bodies a cat or other animal has passed over. All right, so there you have it. I think you guys are mostly safe. A little worried, maybe a little bit, maybe. Okay, so now we're getting into vampire fever. If I should use these words. So yeah, Greece is a popular area, but these stories are awful. I'm sorry. You have vampires also become, as time goes on, become very lusty. They're not only killing people, they want to make out with you. And so in between the 1500s and the 1600s, all of a sudden these vampires, they've been in the grave for a long time, and they're not very good at various things, but they usually go back to their wives. And the wives are not very happy about this. And so there was, of course, the famous smiling vampire who went around smiling saw her and smiled at her and went after her. That's really scary. These are awful stories. Sorry. Watch out for the smiling vampire. And then, of course, what they did. Oh, and he smiled and he killed people as he smiled with them. Okay. But they actually sawed his head off and tore his skin off, and blood started to flow from the cuts. And then, so he gets his head. He doesn't smile anymore. That's good. But they noticed that vampires became very popular in war-torn areas. That's where all these vampire fever happened, especially during the 1720s and 1730s. And can you guys guess where this would be? That's right, the area of Transylvania and Romania and Wallachia, because this area was always being fought over between the Habsburgs on one side and the Holy Roman Empire, right? And also on the other side, you had the Ottomans. And unfortunately, this region got caught in between these warring factions. And so you're going to have quite a lot in the way of a vampire craze. This vampire craze became so popular, how popular, it cemented this idea into popular culture. After that, there's no going back. Vampires are here, and they're here to stay. And of course, most vampires are evil. You do have a few that are not so evil. Another one went about and what is this? He was nice to his wife and always found her shoes. Anyway, these are very strange stories here. But most of them, what is it with shoes? Did you guys notice this? One's bending shoes, the other's giving shoes. I can figure somebody writing a doctoral thesis on that. Vampires and shoes. Is there a connection? I don't know. Then who gets mixed up into this is, of course, gypsies. Oh, no. Gypsies are going, hey, you know what? We are experts. If you want to get the vampires, we have a method that will work. So you can see. So the gypsies went around. So you're fearing vampires? Don't worry. We'll take care of them. So and you see how this goes into folklore and into many movies, right? You always have the gypsy and many stories that will save the day because they'll know exactly what to do because they have everything as a formula. And they're making some profit off of this too, by the way. This is not just a free thing. This is good for them. And so they're taking advantage during the 1720s and 1730s in this particular region of Eastern Europe, trading their wares as vampire killers. Hey, right? They would stake their reputation on it. And they did all the time. It was never a mistake. Okay, so moving right along. Maybe not. Okay, pain in my chest. Sorry. Okay, so what happens here is that there's one story that, and of course, by the way, the other thing they used to do is as they traveled about, they made things worse. They told stories and then retold stories to spread the stories of vampires in these regions. And that was good for business too, by the way, right? Say, hey, you spread this news, we're going to give you the fear and then we'll give you the cure. This works out a little too well. One of the stories they told in the area of Kosovo was about Arnold Pole. He said he warded away this vampire by eating soil drawn from on top of the vampire's grave and also smeared himself with some of its blood. So, he says, hey, this, of course, is going to ward away vampires. But unfortunately, then one day in 1725, Pole fell off from a hay wagon and broke his neck. And guess what happened to him? That's right. He became a vampire. So apparently This is workout. So don't do this. Okay. So he kills about 4 people, and they opened his grave. They found his body had not decomposed, and that fresh blood had flowed from his eyes, nose, mouth, ears, and shirt. And so what happens? They drove a stake through his heart. Suddenly, Paul groaned and began to bleed. They burned both Paul and his 4 supposed victims, following the same rite. And of course, what happens is the gypsies will spread the story, and this will become a very popular story throughout Eastern Europe. Okay, now things are changing. Where before female aspects, spiritual concepts were vampiric, but now you're going to get this idea because of the Romanian culture and the culture of Eastern Europe. The man being amorous and everything else. Now you're going to get the male vampire that's always after the women, right? This is starting, right? This is the big time. Before it was like accident, or almost like zombies, right? It's like zombies before. Like, I'm going to kill you. Yeah, I'm going to give you your shoes. I'm going to kill you too. But now what's going to happen is now it's like, hey, wait, they have presence of mind, and they start thinking, and they're more cunning, right? Before, they're just like dumb dead, zombie-like. Now they're becoming more intelligent, and of course, this is all coming from the gypsies too. Just because you want to. Something that's like just kind of kills you like a monster. It's not that it's scary, but it is creepy. But if this thing can actually think and plot, it makes it far worse of a menace. Is that right? More of a threat. And so now male vampires are shown with strong sexual desire, and we have more, of course, blaming the vampire for deflowering virgins. In fact, that became a big thing. Is that hey, a vampire deflowered me. We talked about this earlier, but this is important because this goes into gypsy culture. Because in gypsy culture, you got to stay a virgin the whole time until you're married. Right? You're supposed to, at least in those days, right? But now, if something did happen, now what this did is it got rid of the honor shame. It took care of the shame aspect, and so that was used quite a bit during the 17th, 18th, and of course 1900s. Okay, moving on. Okay, so what will happen now is they will say that, oh, by the way, the other thing you need to bring with you is salt. Always keep a bag of salt on you. And if a vampire is chasing you, you're supposed to throw the salt behind you, and it will actually stop them. It will confuse them. So just, you take my advice with a grain of salt. But there you have it. And you did, right? Salty. I'm salty to the end. All right. So now we move on to, hey, it's time for the West to react to all these stories. Can I go a little bit over time? Is that okay? You don't mind? Okay. So we're the 1700s. We're a little bit more, not too much. 1746. Now the West is going to be reacting. A Benedictine monk by the name of Calmet wrote a treatise on vampires and revenants. And he wrote this work, and it became so popular, it became the handbook for vampires in the West now. Because the stories of the vampires that were so popular in Eastern Europe were now entering places like France, and of course, always the Holy Roman Empire, which would become the Germanic realms, going into the Netherlands and other places, into England. So the stories are spreading, and you got a handy-dandy handbook to take care of it. And this, of course, becomes a bestseller. That's right. It went through 3 French printings, 1746, notice the date, 1747, and 1748. It appeared in a German edition in 1752, an English edition in 1759. We reprinted in 1850, known as the Phantom World. So this is a big deal. Meanwhile, vampirism kept spreading, like Emperor Maria Theresa had to deal with this, and has tried to. In fact, what happened is that the religious sorts were believing too much in the fact that these vampires are real. And so what she did, they don't forget this. I'm taking the authority when it comes to understanding vampires and dealing with vampires from the church, and I am going to take over. We're going to secularize it. And so she secularized it in order to calm down this situation. And then, of course, then you're going to have, meanwhile, this handy book starts to be taken down by Voltaire. You guys ever heard of Voltaire? Yeah, he starts to take down this book. He thinks, I don't know. I don't think there's anything such as vampires. In fact, he writes something all tongue-in-cheek. He writes as follows: these vampires were corpses who went out of their graves at night to suck the blood of the living, either at the throats or stomachs, after which they returned to their cemeteries. The persons so sucked and weaned grew pale and fell into consumption, while the sucking corpses grew fat and they got rosy and enjoyed an excellent appetite. It was in Poland, Hungary, Silesia, Moravia, Austria, and Lorraine that the dead made this of such good cheer. It's like, wow, the happy vampire. He's being sarcastic. At least I hope he is. No, he's always sarcastic. Isn't he, Voltaire? All right, so what will happen here is we're moving into romanticism. Now, all of a sudden, romanticism hits, and it's like, okay, we have the vampire. The vampire is no longer like a zombie anymore. It has intelligence. It has now, it has a male appetite. Let's make it romantic. Let's just go to the next level. And so romanticism comes about, and Heinrich August Osenfelder writes a poem about a vampire in 1748, which starts to romanticize the image of the vampire. I have it in German. I'm not going to read it right now. Okay, so it's a happy story, right? Then vampiric lore goes into the Ballad of Lenore, first published in 1773, written by Gottfried August Berger. According to the story, Lenore is patiently waiting for the return of her fiancé after the 7-year war. But everybody returns except for her loved ones. Now, this goes into vampiric lore. It's not a vampire story, but it's a romantic story that will be used by Bram Stoker. In fact, quotations from it will be used in Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I have to mention it. This is the beginning, right? So it's the idea of romantic. So here we go. Lenore, she's upset because her lover, the one that she loved, has not returned, and she becomes angry with God, and she blasphemes against God because, hey, everybody came back except for him. Well, her mom corrected her. Hey, you don't blaspheme against God, and he could have found some other lady in Hungary, and been with them, and that's possible. Well, what happens is that then, at the stroke of midnight, a stranger knocks at the door. It looks just like her beloved William. He's on a midnight run, and he joins him on his horse and says that we're heading off to our marriage bed. So she climbs upon the black steed, and they move through this eerie landscape. And then, she says, "Wow, we're kind of going fast, a little too fast." And she asks, "Why do we have to ride so fast?" And he responds, "Die Toten reiten schnell," which is the dead travel fast. It's like, uh-oh. And of course, this this line is found in Stoker's Dracula, right? She quickly responds, "Lass sie ruhen, die Toten," leave the dead alone. As the sun rises, they arrive at the gates of the cemetery, and the horse disappears into the tombstone, and her William becomes a skeletal figure with a sigh and an hourglass, revealing that the owner of the horse was Death himself. And of course, the marriage bed turns out to be William's grave, and a skeleton is there, surrounded by shattered armor. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet gives way, and she falls into the grave. It's pretty scary, right? The spirits surround her, dancing in the moonlight, and declaring, "Mit Gott in Himmel hadlich nicht." No one is to quarrel with God in heaven. And that's the end of her. So, yikes. So, but this idea, this romanticism, starts to go into vampiric lore, and we'll, of course, jump in to the vampire legends. And, of course, in 1797, Goethe writes the birth of the Bride of Corinth. And so, these ideas are spreading, right? Then we get, 1797, you have a work called Christabel, which is a narrative poem written in two parts, one published in 1797, one 1800, which connects to vampiric lore in literature. It talks about a female figure by the name who encounters a certain Geraldine, who claims to have been abducted from her home by a band of robbers. But she shows supernatural signs. And there's, of course, obviously a dog barks at her, and there's a mysterious flame on a dead fire that appears, and they spend the night together. And there's a certain mark on her, and of course, the idea is that this is a vampire. But the poem is not finished. But it brings us into an interesting bit. The reason why I bring this up is desire between a female vampire and a female. And you're going to see this a lot in literature, vampiric literature, in the early 20th century. We'll talk about where that starts in a few moments.
Is that called Christabel?
This is Christabel. Yes, it sure is.
Coleridge?
Huh?
He's the author,
Yes, it's Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Yeah, yes. Then we get another story, Thalabada, the Destroyer, that does mention, 1801 does mention the vampire that he has to attack. And then we get to, you just can't make this up. We're towards the conclusion. And that is, the name is Vancy the Vampire. It's like, what is this? Like Barney the Vampire. Sorry, it's Barney. It's Varney the Vampire. Varney the Vampire. And it's like, it's close to, and these are penny dreadfuls, right? Written by James Malcolm Reimer and Thomas Pickett Prest. It appeared in various volumes from, because it was a penny dreadful. So it went for 232 chapters. It went on for 1845 to 1847. And according to this story, once again, you're going to have a lot of things show up. In this story, here it is. In this story between 1845 or 1847, you're going to see that this vampire named Barney, he was cursed because he betrayed a royalist to Oliver Cromwell. And you know what? Maybe he deserves that. Oliver Cromwell, not a nice guy. I just got to tell you right off the top. So he should be a vampire for that. Anyway, and you're not sure, sometimes you're not sure if he wants to have money or he wants to have blood. It's a little strange there. And he's able to survive during the daytime, and sometimes he does eat food. So, but he also has fangs. He's the first one that has the fangs. He's the first one to go around and biting people's necks specifically in order to drink their blood. That comes from old Varney, right? He's also the first one to be known to hypnotize with his power of his eyes. So he looks at you and you go through hypnosis. That's also him, So there you have it. And he has supernatural strength. So a lot of the major ideas of vampires comes from old Varney. He loves you and you love him, and wait, what? He loves you a little too much. And then we get the inspiration, known as Carmilla or Carmela. And this is, of course, a very famous story, 1872. This inspired many who are into vampiric lore. It's written by Le Fanu. He presents the story like a case of a certain Dr. Hesselus. So this is, the case story. And the story goes in and talks about Laura. That is the protagonist of the story. And accordingly, she had this vision when she was 6 years old of this beautiful stranger. And she happened to be in her bedchamber. She then later claimed that that the stranger had punctured her breast. Okay, although they didn't find anything, but she had this strange dream, according to the story. Well, a little bit later on, 12 years later, in fact, Laura was heard a story about a friend that was lost, a carriage accident outside Laura's home, then unexpectedly brings a girl that happens to be the same age as her, and her name is Carmela. And they instantly recognize one another as being from, guess what? That dream. So the best way to put this is a relationship starts between the two. So long and the short of it is, and interestingly, she's strange a little bit. Carmela's strange. First of all, they always gathered together for like little church services. You know what? She was never there. She never showed up. I don't know what happened to her. The other thing is that she slept, during the day. That's a little strange. Very beautiful, though. Very beautiful. Well, then what happens is, you can see where this is going, people in the surrounding village start disappearing, which is suspicious. And then they find a painting, an heirloom, of a portrait of her ancestor, Mircalla, the Countess of Karnstein, dated from 1698. And guess what? It looks just like, guess who? Carmela. It may be the same, right? Meanwhile, during Carmela's stay, Laura has nightmares of a large cat-like beast entering her room and biting her chest. Of course, that's what cats do anyway. So I don't know if that's strange at all. We have cats. Or maybe it is a vampire, right? Maybe you have, anyway. So she's known to turn into a cat, right? It's a smart cat, right? And you can understand, I won't tell the whole story because you should read it for yourself. But what will happen is they will find out the truth. And of course, that's the end of her, right? So, but there's a relationship, and it is not only an erotic relationship at times, it is considered an early form of a lesbian love story, in the Victorian age. And so this is the way that it can be explained. And that brings us to, we got there. Bram Stoker, right? We all know him, right? So Bram, when he publishes work in 1897, and we know the story. One thing about Bram Stoker is that he is living in a very stifling Victorian context in England. And we do know that he wrote very interesting poetry to Walt Whitman that for that period of time, remember, in England, being gay was a crime. It was a crime. It was, in fact, his Oscar Wilde was actually imprisoned for being a homosexual. And it's interesting because he was a close friend of Oscar Wilde. And within the year after his incarceration, he wrote Dracula. Isn't that fascinating? And so many scholars, we're not just talking a few, many scholars have seen this as a metaphor of Victorian England and him dealing with the fact that what he is attracted to, that he himself is gay, and that what he is attracted to is looked down upon and is dangerous to believe what he believed. In fact, before 1812, he actually was very outspoken against homosexuality to the point where it's like, come on, buddy, what are you doing? Are you hiding something, right? I mean, what is going on there? And the fact of the matter is that you read his literature, and so much of this is a metaphor, sexuality and seduction and the corruption of English womanhood, right? These themes are going there. And so what will happen, the long and the short of it is that you have this idea also of seductive penetration to drain another male. You're seeing this, right? You've seen the metaphor here, right? And of course, he's fighting this Victorian standards. In many cases, you're going to have, as we go through this, we don't have a lot of time, but we take a look at some of the characters. Like Lucy is looked at as a new woman that is fighting the Victorian culture to do something in a different way. I hope I'm not ruining Bram Stoker's, Dracula, but maybe it gives it more meaning because he's fighting the system and he's inverting things and he's describing things using this allegorical method. And then, of course, that goes into the vampire connections. All right, so that's the beginning of the West, and I'm going to give you about 5 minutes about talking about other places because you're thinking, well, Dr. Rifa, you covered vampires. And, we could see where, Anne Rice got her ideas. We figured it out, right? We're almost done, right? Is there more? Well, guess what? Vampires are everywhere. Not to make you paranoid. and vampires are in the Philippine Islands, for example. The Philippine Islands they have what's called Tagalogs, and these are bloodsuckers. You also have Visayan Managos. A Tagalog basically takes the form of an attractive girl by day, but at night it has wings and a long, hollow, thread-like tongue by night. They use this elongated tongue to suck fetuses off of pregnant women. They also eat entrails. Yikes. Okay. The Visayan is described to be an older, beautiful woman that is capable of severing its upper torso in order to fly into the night with huge bat-like wings and prey on unsuspecting, sleeping pregnant women. Are you seeing a connection here with the earlier forms of the vampires in the supernatural sense that we just talked about? And you see that these stories and legends are all the way around the globe, right? In Indonesia, okay, you have those called the Pontiacs, and also in Malaysia too. These are attractive women with long black hair that covers a hole in the back of her neck from which she sucks the blood of children. And then so she has a whole, it's pretty scary stuff. Okay, in Malaysia, you have the Penanggalan, either a beautiful old or young woman who obtained her beauty through the action of black magic. She's she's demonic, and she's able to detach her fanged head, which flies around in the night looking for blood. Oftentimes pregnant women again. In Cambodia, you have the Khmers, who are luminescent, so they glow around, and they're able to detach their head at night and float along, peering through windows of houses in search of lungs, hearts, and blood. And their entrails hang out from their heads as they move along. And that's just scary as ever. And China, of course, has the Jin Gushi, which is interesting story. Basically, what happens is that the Chinese have these traditions, and they want to make sure that you bury your loved one at home. Well, what if your loved one dies somewhere else? So what you do is you hire a sorcerer to reanimate the body of your loved one so that it will walk home so it can receive a proper burial. That makes sense, right? So it's not alive, but you don't want to carry it, this way it'll walk. Now, there's a problem here, and you can see where the problem is that what if you don't pay the sorcerer? Because a lot of times we're not going to pay this guy. And what happens is they put a magical incantations right on their head that keeps them under this power, right? So what happens is if you don't pay the sorcerer, what they'll do is they'll just rip it off, and then it'll become a monster and attack everybody. Isn't that great? No? Okay. So watch out. So you don't want to do that, You got to make sure you pay the person who reanimates your loved one and make sure they gets home. All right. So we go through the ages and we see changes going about. You're going to see Lots of stories. I mean, vampires go through some phases. Bloodthirsty killers. And then, of course, you got, by the way, Dracula's Daughter that came out in 1936 actually is a kind of a brief version of Camilla. And that particular work was used by Anne Rice for her inspiration of Interview with a Vampire. So remember the Camilla story I just told you? That goes from there to Dracula's Daughter, which you can rent from 1930. Have you ever seen Dracula's Daughter from 1936? Oh, well, there's something you got to rent. Yeah. And she saw that, and she used that for her inspiration for her works. And I think, hey, that's a good time to maybe check that out. And then, of course, you're going to have Bela Lugosi, 1931. Before that, right? The famous first play on Nine for Outer State. Looking really bad. And then you have the Christopher Lee as the Great Count, with all these things I mentioned included. Well, then something happens during the 60s. It's time for vampires to become family friendly. That's right. So you're going to have the song, The Monster Mash, right? Remember 1962, right? How about the Munsters, right? Right, yeah, the Munsters, right? Grandpa. Everybody loves Grandpa, right? Of course, you have the vampire, the soap opera, 1966. Remember Dark Shadows, right? You guys follow that, right? So it's going to be, and how about Roman Polanski's The Fearless Vampire Killers? Well, that's not too happy. But
there's a Muppet.
But there's a Muppet in there, yeah.
Yeah, there's a vampire Muppet.
We, of course, you do have the Count from the Muppets, right? 1972, Sesame Street, 1, 2, right? Right, that guy? Yeah, right. So you got that. And then all of a sudden, there's a transition. Vampires as sex symbols. That comes about in the mid-70s. Now, all of a sudden, they're what? Yeah. So you're going to have, of course, Interview with a Vampire, right? 1976, Anne Rice. You're going to have this is terrible. 1978. Have you guys seen Martin? Okay. So George Romero's Martin. Basically, what happens is he thinks he's a vampire. He really thinks that he's 84 years old. And what he does is he gets with women and he passes them out. He knocks them out and he uses razors to suck their blood. And you're not sure, is he really a vampire or is he just a really sick kid? And the interesting thing is he has these dreams, or are they reality of this romantic past of him as this vampire in the early part of the 20th century, and you're not sure what's real and what's not real. So that's Martin, but it does reveal an aspect of vampirism that has not been addressed, and that is vampirism is often used as a representation of the idea of rape. Think about it, rape, right? And so you have that. Then we move on. Well, then of course now we're back to sex symbols. Some of these are not sex symbols at all. But you have George Hamilton, remember, Love at First Bite? Remember that movie? You guys ever see that one? I'm sorry. I have the photo novel of that. I shouldn't mention that one. Right, yeah. And then of course you have the vampire, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. First the 1992, the show, right? The movie, Christy Swanson. And then of course Sarah Michelle Gellar, 1997, 2003. Everybody loved Angel or Spike. I know you guys are probably on the fence between which one you like best. But look, all those aspects of vampires are there. Even Spike is a pretty good reputation of a vampire representation. You see that? He's fighting his hunger. Going back, Angel's just kind of a pansy. Anyway, I didn't say that out loud. I'm sorry. Did I say that? Okay, I said that loud. Okay, so there you go. You have, of course, you have Fox Mulder meets the sultry vampire in X-Files, right?
Oh, it's pretty good.
Right, Leslie Nielsen, remember in Dracula, dead and loving that. It's kind of, hey, it's Leslie Nielsen though, right?
Leslie.
And of course, I don't know, Wesley Snipes, I know, and that's Blade. Right, And then of course you have Van Helsing, 2004. Then of course you have Stephanie Myers, and what did she release? Twilight. That's right. So I mean, we're talking sex symbols, right? We are, right? So, but remember, you're gonna blame Joss Whedon for going that direction too, with the angel thing. And but now all of a sudden they just kind of glimmer and glow. You had True Blood, 2008, right? Vampire Diaries, 2009, right? So going into popular culture, and of course that brings us, all the way kind of up to date. So vampires, they're just cool, right? They come a long ways from being the Lilith and killing babies and being these zombie-like creatures that are attacking people, sucking your blood. Now they're pretty sophisticated. They're romantic. They're people want to become a vampire. I mean, what's going on here? Because vampires supposedly live forever, or well, maybe if that's living, I don't know if that's much of a life. But there you have it. Do you feel like you understand vampires? Right? You understand where they came from, the phenomenology in a very complete way. Well, if so, that's great. If not, you can ask me questions. But at this point, I'm just going to say that I hope this talk didn't suck. And because I know sometimes I can be a pain in the neck. Sorry. And but I know sometimes I'm coughing too much. But and I don't think my reputation is at stake. So go ahead and ask your questions. Other than that, thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy the talk. Let's get a picture. There we go. Let's see here. There we go. Let's see here. Yeah, okay. What's up? There we go. All right. Okay, so did you guys learn anything? You good?
Okay, so there were no questions?
I didn't see any questions on the
Okay, I guess we're gonna shut it down then.
I've got a question. Crowley was in Golden Dawn with Bram Stoker, and Alistair Crowley was in the Golden Dawn with Bram Stoker.
Okay.
And he wrote that Ordo Draco started with the Egyptian priest Ankh-Afenfonsen. His funeral stele was some stele in the Egyptian museum. This was like a central thing to Crowley's.
Right. What happens is the idea that the Order of the Dragon goes back into Egyptian mythology. We have to be very careful because there's always very strong intentions to connect the Golden Dawn and other occult traditions back to the Egyptians through various agencies like the New World Order or the Illuminati, or of course Illuminati especially for that period of time, or the Masonic aspect, with Masons and so forth. And so when it comes from a historical perspective, there is no connection to it.
To Golden Dawn and the Masons, right?
A connection to the Golden Dawn Masons, important for that time, but there's no actual connection to ancient Egypt.
Between Ordo Draco and ancient Egypt?
No, hold on. No connections between that at all.
What about between Ordo Draco and Jewish traditions like a priestly lineage of Melchizedek?
Okay, so once again, we're back to looking into the Order of Melchizedek, and I know about that as well. And that does go through, the Melchizedek order does go through certain Jewish mystical traditions that Crowley could possibly connect with, but the origins of it when it comes to the Dakuda and the Crusades, especially against the Ottomans, start in the early part of the 1400s. And so, I mean, it starts as deliberate, and we have those meetings, and there's nothing that's before that. Are there other orders of the dragon? Yeah, absolutely. There are others. And sometimes they want to tether these traditions together because of the similarity of names. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean that it's true. But we have to be very careful when it comes to Masonic legends and stories. And the interesting part about that is we actually talk about that in my class. At Cal Poly Pomona, we actually have a whole unit where we go through the origins of these kinds of stories, like the Illuminati, like the Masons, and we go through and do a careful study of this, going into the primary sources. It doesn't mean that there are no connections, but going all the way back to Egypt, it's always problematic. But it's a good question because my students also ask the same kind of question.
So I knew you'd find something on it. You know,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
Going back to the floating body parts, is that just like one specific part of the world, or is it worldwide? Because I may have seen a vampire. I mean, it explains the floating hand by my shower window, which I could not explain. But,
Well, okay, so
just saying.
So the question is, are there other? Okay, so I talked about stories of floating heads, vampiric heads that has their intestines that are flowing after them. So their bodies, so they kind of move, so they attach themselves from their bodies and they move their intestines following after them. Okay. No, the answer to the question is, it's fascinating. In my class, again, Cal Poly Pomona, we have a section where we tell ghost stories. And what I do is I have a rubric whereby when we tell the ghost stories, they can choose to do a story that they completely made up. They can choose to do a story that they heard from somebody else, and they can do a story that they believe happened to them. That way, it creates a safe area in the anthropological sense where they can tell their story and not feel like they're put on the spot, right? It gives them a safe harbor. What is interesting is I've had some of my students talk about the fact that they have seen not ghosts, but vampire-like creatures that have heads that are floating with the stuff, the body parts, the intestines floating after them. In fact, one of them said that they saw this happening, and later on, she said they saw that her uncle, who had played with women in the wrong way, was hung from a tree with a noose around his neck, and they had to pick him up, and he said that this creature put him up there. I mean, these are stories that are quite frequent, but it turned out the majority of these stories come from my students who are from the Philippine Islands, they're from Malaysia, they're from Thailand, they're from Myanmar. So a large portion of them happen to be from Southeast Asia. Having said that, some of those students have seen those here, but their background is from Southeast Asia, which is fascinating to me from an anthropological standpoint. Where are they bringing their culture to here, the United States, or is there something there to it? Does that make sense? So I'm giving you the answer. The perception is, so it doesn't say that you didn't see these things. I have students who say they have, and they have seen these things here. And the question is, how do we understand that from a folklore perspective? And the fun part is, because I teach 2 of these classes every semester, and I usually have around 30 students, I hear, when it comes to ghost stories or supernatural stories, I hear 60 every semester. And you add it up, and that's quite a few stories. And they have to have a written general version of it. And that makes it fascinating too. So I start making connections. So it is possible. Any other questions?
I have a quick little question real fast. I know you mentioned when they exhume bodies, they notice that they didn't decay.
Right.
Is it? I thought I heard for someone to be considered a saint, they also they have to not decay.
Yes.
Within a month or so of their burial.
Yep.
And have there been cases of saints being considered vampires?
Well, and that's where it gets interesting. This is an excellent question. The question is, wait a second. The idea that the idea of the body not corrupting, seeing that, was looked at or viewed that this person was possibly a vampire. So what do we do with the idea of saints who are declared saints because their body has not corrupted? What is it that's within that context? Well, here's the answer. The answer, first of all, is that you're going to have an individual who has died, but was viewed as problematic by the surrounding society already. So already the cultural construct of the village or the town or the local city saw this person as problematic. So you already have that preconception. The other factor is that when they do, the other factor is you have all these terrible things happening immediately after that person dies. So immediately, so it's happening over a period of time, and they start becoming suspicious because then they see somebody who resembles this person also being involved in the situation, which wouldn't happen with the saint, right? It wouldn't be, right, And then what happens is then they exhume him, but his body, it's not corrupted, but it is because oftentimes it's really ugly. It's really bloated. I mean, remember, it's like a drum. Remember, they're rolling this guy around, and it's making a drum noise. I mean, playing a human. I mean, that's awful. But I mean, so they don't look too good. Where a saint, they have a beautification. They're beautiful. They're well preserved, and everything is put together, and everything is symmetrical, and their faces look good. Is that making sense? So you have that aspect too. And then, of course, obviously, when it comes to sainting, this happens years and years later, and they exhume the body, and it's been 100 years or even longer, and the body's still preserved, and that won't happen in those instances. Having said that, however, there's always exceptions to the rule, and you're going to have that concept where is this person a saint or is this a person a sinner, and that becomes a problematic aspect when you get into the Greek Orthodox Church, because what do you do when you automatically start exhuming people at 3 to 5 years? You don't have that time scale. so it's like it's kind of like roll the dice. Is this guy a good guy or not a good guy? Saint? No, I'm just kidding. But that makes sense. Saint, sinner, kind of in between. No, it's never like that, because the same process goes on for a very long time. It has to go through all these tests, and so it kind of it filters through any possibility that it could be a vampire. So, like I said, we're looking. Of course, we're talking these questions theoretical. People are like, "Oh my God," But yeah, any good other questions? These are good. No? You guys good? All right. Thank you so much for being here, and